Welcome to Corporate Competitor, presented by Forbes Books, the podcast where the world's greatest executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. After more than 200 episodes with CEOs and senior leaders like Chick-fil-A Chairman Dan Cathy, Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian, Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan, and former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, one thing is clear. Whether they were inducted into their Sports Hall of Fame or hung up their cleats after high school, sports has been a powerful, shared foundation for success. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and each week, in partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, we bring you genuine, authentic, fireside chat-like conversations with influential leaders so you can apply their insights to elevate your leadership. With me for today's episode is Kristen Faulker, a two-time Olympic gold medalist and the first Team USA women's road race medalist in 40 years. Kristen excelled as a three-sport athlete in high school and rode at Harvard. After starting her career in venture capital, she discovered a new passion, cycling, and made the bold decision to leave her executive role to pursue the sport full-time. Today, Kristen races with EF Oatley Cannondale, and I'm excited to learn how she balanced a demanding career with elite training as a true full-circle corporate competitor. Make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights.
We're going to respect those quirks. I actually do this with every team I join. I go through every single member and I come up with at least one or two things that I deeply respect about that person because it allows me to go into every interaction with them and really focus on that thing. You're never going to like another person's traits 100%. But if you can really focus on, like, I really respect this person for this reason and do that with every one of your team members, it's going to make you feel a lot closer and you're going to appreciate them for those things and what they bring to the table.
Kristen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
You know, in 2017, you took an intro to cycling class. 7 years later, you win Olympic gold. I'm sure that drove a lot of other cyclists crazy. Now, here's the lady. Where did she come from? But it was even more historic as it was the first time that the Team USA had placed a women's road race medal in 40 years. So walk me through walking into that class. I mean, you're just looking for a new way to exercise. I assume you weren't looking for Olympic history.
Definitely not. I was living in New York City. I had been a rower in college and I really missed being part of a team. I missed being in the outdoors. Living in New York City was quite challenging because it's a concrete jungle. I'm from Alaska, so I really wanted to get that outdoors fix every day. I wanted to be in nature. And I felt like the closest I could get to that in New York City was in Central Park. I started cycling as a way to get exercise every day, get outside, see the little green. And it quickly turned into a passion. Being a very competitive person, as soon as I started, I was like, oh, I want to be as good as I can be. So when I went to my introductory class, it was really just something to do for fun. Yeah, I did not expect that 7 years later, I would be standing with an Olympic gold medal around my neck. Absolutely not.
So this is interesting, missing being part of a team. I understand that in rowing, but cycling isn't really a team sport, is it?
I think it's a misconception that it's not a team sport. You do have one person on the podium, but for every single race, the team director before the race picks a team leader and they say, we're going to race for Kristen today, or we're going to race for Eliza today. And then the entire team sacrifices themselves to help that winner win. On some days, I might be the team leader. On other races, my teammate might be the team leader.
Did you know you were the one that they were going to be riding for?
Well, the Olympics was a little bit of an exception to this dynamic. For most races throughout the season, teams get 6 to 7 riders per race. The Olympics, each team only gets 4 riders per race. For the US, we only qualified 2 riders.
Oh.
The other rider, Chloe, and I were both really strong. We were both capable of winning this race. So the director ahead of time said, we want to give you each opportunities to win in different moments, but we're not going to make one of you sacrifice the entire race for the other. So Kristen try and attack solo. And if it doesn't work out, we'll help Chloe for the sprint. Plan A, plan B. In one situation, you might support the other one. You sometimes see that in races, but I think it was very unique to the Olympics just because the team sizes were so small that most teams didn't have the same depth of support riders that we would in a normal race throughout the season.
Yeah.
But every cyclist has different strengths that they bring to the table. Maybe we have a climber, we have a sprinter, we have a more punchy rider. Maybe we have someone who's a good time trialist. And depending on the course is going to suit that kind of rider. So everyone gets different opportunities throughout the year. And it's all about selecting a team leader before, and then everyone has a role to play in the race. For some riders, their role is to help position you in the right moment. For other leaders or for other domestiques, what they call support riders, the goal is to be there with you in the finale, to help play with numbers, to distract the other teams, to chase down attacks. When you watch on TV, you don't see a lot of that dynamic because you don't really see the effects of drafting, which can save 30% energy. Your teammates are there to help you draft off them to save energy so that you can be more fresh in the finale. So in some ways, it can be more of a team sport, but because soccer or rowing, everyone sacrifices and everyone wins together. But in cycling, it requires even more trust because you might sacrifice yourself and work your butt off, but then you receive nothing.
Mm.
So you really have to respect the teammate you're working for.
Wow. So, what kind of things do you do to make you that person that they'd want to sacrifice for?
I think the biggest thing is just acknowledging the value that everyone brings to the outcome. For example, if I have a teammate, she might work her butt off for the first hour of the race, and then she pulls out and gets 100th place because she's completely cracked. She doesn't get any glory because there's no one on the sidelines. There's no fans that are like, oh my goodness, she did so well. She probably got 100th place because she did so much work in the beginning. When you get back to the team dust and you're debriefing the race, it's so important to acknowledge the work that she did, acknowledge how much she contributed to the outcome. That's true for everyone. Be really grateful. Make sure people feel really valued for the work that they're doing. Because a lot of times people do work and they don't always feel that their work is acknowledged. They don't always feel valued for the work they do. As a junior analyst, I was kind of the low woman on the totem pole. A lot of times, partners are the ones who make the decision. So you go to the company's website, the partner did this deal, or the partner worked on this deal, or you write an investment memo for your partner, and then their name is on it, but not yours. I had some really great experiences where I would contribute a lot to a research project or an investment memo. And the partners would make sure during the meeting to say, Kristen did really great work on this memo. Or if you have questions, Kristen, why don't you answer that question for the group? Or Kristen, what do you think about this investment? And what are your concerns? And so I really felt like I was part of the team and part of the investment, as opposed to kind of this silent person working in the background who didn't get acknowledged. That taught me how important it is because there were times where I also wasn't acknowledged for the work that I did. So many people find meaning in work when they feel like they're contributing and that they're being acknowledged for the work that they do. And I think when people feel discouraged or burned out, it's usually because they feel like they're putting in so much work and no one's acknowledging it or recognizing it.
What a great leadership lesson that is.
Mm-hmm.
Your story is fantastic, rower, venture capital, and then you're cycling and you decide, you know what, I'm going to do something with this. Was there an aha moment for you when you realized, you know what, I just don't want to ride around Central Park. I want to go do something bigger?
There were quite a few moments. When I was in New York, there was this woman who had come before me. Her name was Evie Stevens, and she had started out in Central Park and then made it to Europe and left her job to race professionally. When I started winning races, people were like, oh, you're the next Evie Stevens. And I think for me, having a role model like that, having someone who'd come before me was pretty impactful because it kind of started my vision of what was possible. Before then, maybe I wouldn't have thought about leaving my job. But now I thought, oh, there's people who actually have done this before, who've been successful at it. And then when I moved to California and joined a professional team, I went to Europe and I won a stage at my very first race in Europe. And that was another aha moment. Oh, wow, I'm actually good at this. It's not just something I love. I can actually be successful at it. And eating dinner with my brother, I said, look, I really want to go to the Olympics one day. I think I could do this, but I have to leave my job in order to pursue it. That's a really big risk. And I don't know if I can do that. My brother said to me, is the Olympics a dream or is it a goal? It's a dream. Well, if it's a dream, of course you have to go do it. Like, why would you even consider not doing it? If it's a dream, then you don't have one choice.
Mm.
There's really nothing greater in life than pursuing your dream. And if you have the opportunity to do it, a lot of the small things like life just shouldn't get in the way. And I had this opportunity, so I had to take it.
Small things can't get in the way, like venture capital.
Yeah. Oh, but I'm not going to make as much money, or I have to move away from home. I'm going to have a lot to learn and it's going to be really hard. And those things are hard to acknowledge, but they're not nearly as hard as being 80 years old looking back and thinking I didn't pursue my greatest life dream.
Wow.
They seem big in the moment, but when you take a step back and look at the trajectory of your life, what do you have? Like a few dreams in your life, and this is one of them?
No regret.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, I love that. Did you ever spend any time with Evie Stevens?
We've communicated over email. I'm hoping to get dinner with her this winter when I'm back in California before the holidays. We haven't actually met in person, but we're in the process of trying to make it happen.
I love that because the idea that someone cut a little bit of that path ahead of you allowed you to enter it with a little bit more confidence. And now you're going to have people looking up to you. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
You had to know your dream was real. Going to the Olympics was a true possibility because the skill was there.
Mm.
Coach me. Coach me on how to decide whether or not to take that risk. I mean, did you do a Ben Franklin list? What do you do?
Oh my goodness, so many pros and cons lists. So I prepared really, really well. I researched it like I was researching investment memos, but ultimately I did have to follow my gut. And I think my gut was informed by the research I had done and the preparation I had done. On the surface, it might seem like I took this really big, risky leap, and absolutely I did. I also prepared for it as much as I could. I knew that I wasn't going to really make money my first 2 years. So I had to make sure I had some savings and I had a plan B for a side job to make some money on the side if I needed to. I actually considered leaving my job after 2 years in venture capital, but I waited another 2 years because A, I wanted to have a bit more savings when I left. And then B, I wanted 2 more years to really validate that I was good enough. So there's a time where you have to figure out A, am I ready? And B, have I mitigated some of the risks? I wasn't actually ready 2 years after venture capital. I was only a year after starting cycling. I hadn't won any major national races. I hadn't joined a professional team. I had this goal, but my skills weren't there yet. I had to spend another year or two preparing so that I was good enough. If I had tried to go professional too early, I wouldn't have been good and it would have been really frustrating. And I don't think I even would have qualified to make certain teams in certain races. It maybe would have set me back even further. I hired a coach to look at my numbers, did a lot of races and won some national level races, joined a professional team, started training with current professionals to see how did I rank up against them. I did a training race in Europe, which was my very first one, to see what the life of a professional was. I tried it for 2 months to see if I liked it before I actually committed. And then making sure that I was okay with the risks and that I could mitigate some of the risks before I went. There's the financial risk. There's the risk that I'm not good enough. There's the risk that I'm going to be homesick. There's the risk of not having any friends over there. There's the risk that I would crash. So I had to work on my bike handling skills to make sure I was safer. I had to try to make friends before I moved to Europe so that I had somebody there that I knew. I had to speak with coaches and other riders to learn about the lifestyle. As I was making these pros and cons lists, I was also trying to figure out what are the risks and what could go wrong, and how can I prepare for those risks and know what's coming, but also mitigate them as much as possible. Ultimately, when things started to come together, when I said, okay, now I'm financially secure enough. Now my skills are good enough to go to Europe. Now I feel like I've learned what the lifestyle is like and I'm prepared for it. I felt ready enough to take the leap.
So do all the research, make pros and cons lists. Obviously, I love that. I do that too. Prepare for the risks and not just financial, but social and others. And then whatever risks that there were that you couldn't completely manage, be okay with the fact that you might just have to fight through it.
Yeah, and you're not going to have all the answers. At some point you have to be comfortable not having all the answers. I wanted to have all of the answers before I made a decision, but I learned in venture capital you can't. I was investing in early stage companies that we didn't know what the future held for them. We didn't know what the future was going to be for AI. We didn't know what the future was going to be for drones or for space. So we had to take a calculated risk, the best guess possible. I approached my cycling the same way, but ultimately I'm going to have to take this leap knowing that I don't have all the answers.
It's interesting. On our mutual friend John O'Leary's podcast, you said that courage is not about being fearless. It's about acknowledging the fear and then pushing forward anyway.
Mm.
That was really, really powerful. We talk about these lessons and you're proof that it works both ways. People told you that you would learn with time. You didn't like that answer.
Yeah, cycling is an interesting sport in that most people start cycling, at least most racers start cycling when they're adolescents, or 12, 13 years old, sometimes even younger.
And you picked it up at age
24.
Wow.
Right. There weren't books on this. A lot of professional cyclists, they just learned by doing for decades. So when I started, they said, oh, you just need to practice more. You need to do more races. You need more experience. And it was this notion that I couldn't get good faster. There was kind of a steady trajectory for how fast you can improve. I didn't like that because I was like, well, there's always ways you can accelerate your learning. And look, I don't have the time to get in 10 years of race days before I can be good enough. If I'm going to do this, I have to get good fast. And I didn't know all the riders. That's really important to know the riders, their strengths, their weaknesses, their style of racing.
And if you'd had 10 years worth of riding, you would have known them all.
Exactly.
Right.
To solve that, I made flashcards of every riders. I don't have time to race with them all to get to know them. For this podcast, you could get to know me by spending time with me. You could also get to know me by listening to my podcast and researching about me and reading articles about me. And I took that same approach to cycling, which is a very two-pronged approach to learning through experience, but also learning through research. To maximize learning, you actually need to do both.
Mm.
Both have value. You can learn faster through research, and you can learn kind of in a more holistic, deep way through experience. Same is true in school. You don't learn math just by trying to experience math in nature. Like you sit down with a textbook, you learn math, and then you go apply it to the real world. So I'm going to do my research, and then I'm going to go apply it in races. I think most people just hadn't had that approach before. Most people had just kind of learned through doing. Yeah, I made flashcards of all the riders. After every single race, I would go through with my coach and I would analyze the moves I made, what I was thinking. And I would ask him, I would say, was I thinking about the right thing in this moment? What would you have done differently? And I looked at the winner of the race. What were they doing in the first hour of the race? What decisions were they making? Where were they positioned? If I wanted to win this race from a solo attack, where should I have done it? And what was the right moment? And I started to analyze races in depth. So I'd watch the Tour de France and I'd say, oh, did this rider make a mistake here? Did he attack at the wrong time? What was wrong with this sprinter? Why did they not win? I felt like I was a student of the sport, as if I was studying for a college math exam.
Right.
I asked so many questions and I wasn't afraid to ask the stupid questions. I did have a lot to learn and I was really naive, but I think I came across even more naive than I was because I was asking really basic questions to make sure that I could learn everything and that I wasn't missing anything. Sometimes when I thought I knew the answers, I would still ask the question just to double check. I had no ego around it. It was just finding ways to accelerate my learning curve that maybe other people weren't forced to have to do themselves.
I love it. So you weren't just studying your behaviors, you were actually studying others. You were trying to ask the person who won the race what they do in the first hour.
Mm-hmm.
What a great lesson that is for us as well. Because for many of us, we're busy kind of analyzing ourselves. We're not thinking about breaking down the competition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the stories I read about you talked about a former boss who talked to you about being T-shaped,
Mm-hmm.
have a deep expertise in one area while staying broad in others. How has that philosophy influenced your career? Like, talk us through living a T-shaped life.
So in venture capital, you have to be broad in a lot of areas in order to understand basic business principles. You have to understand sales,
Right.
contracts, legal terms, basic finances, and how to fund a company and do basic marketing to help your marketing team. All of these functions, you don't have to be the expert in each of them as the investor, but you have to know a little bit about each of them to make sure your companies are at least on the right track.
Right.
But you also have to be deep in one area in order to win deals. So if you are trying to win a company in AI, but you only know a little bit about AI, you're probably going to lose the deal to someone who's an expert in that space. So you have to make sure that you have your secret sauce that makes you irreplaceable. And that's usually the deep area. And if you don't have that, it's very easy to replace you in the workforce.
So what was your secret sauce?
Well, I was really good at analyzing data, something that I really enjoyed. And then I was also really good at seeing things from an outsider's perspective. I had grown up in the restaurant industry. My parents own a restaurant. I had worked as a busser and a waitress. I had worked every odd job. And when I started in venture capital, I found this restaurant software business, Restaurant 365. And most VCs said, look, the restaurant industry is fragmented. Most restaurants fail. It's not a typical venture investment. So a lot of VCs dismissed it as it wouldn't be a good deal. Look, I don't come from the venture capital world, but I come from a world where I can see that this is actually a good investment. And I wasn't afraid to push back against the grain and see things from the perspective of the specific restaurant deal as opposed to the typical VC. Ultimately, we ended up doing the deal and it's been incredibly successful. If I had been afraid to go against the grain and see things differently, we never would have done the deal and we would have missed out on a really good opportunity.
Wow, that's awesome.
So I often think about, how do I have a layer of basic skills so that I can connect with different organizations, different people in the organizations, and communicate them and understand what they're saying, but also have my own area of expertise that makes me irreplaceable. Cycling is the same way. You have to have a broad range of skills to not get dropped in a race. You have to be a good enough climber. You have to be punchy enough. You have to be a good enough time trialist. You have to be light enough and strong enough, and you have to be technical enough. Those are all going to make sure that you stay in the race when things get really hard. Then you also have to have a deep area, which allows you to win. When you're going to the finish line of the group of 10 riders, you can't just be mediocre at something. You have to be the best at something in order to win. So when I started cycling, I actually felt that I was really deep in my physical strength, and I had really good power numbers, but I was actually weak in a lot of the other broader areas, like my bike handling skills and my sprinting. Like I would get dropped in races in certain moments because I was a really bad descender and I wasn't good enough at cornering. And certain moments in the race, the lack of these kind of basic skills would cause me to fall back in the race. Similarly, I didn't actually have a very great deep way of winning when I started. There were a lot of races where I would find myself in the finale, but then I couldn't win from a group of 10 people. And it wasn't until I started racing for a while where I learned, okay, I'm really good at attacking. That is my weapon. That is how I'm going to win. And I'm very, very good at that. When you start a new job or you start a new skill or you start a new hobby, it's important to think about what are the fundamental basic things where I need breadth and what is the skill where I need depth. Depth can be something you think about ahead of time in terms of what's valuable for this role. Or you can think of depth as what am I really good at and how do I maximize that in order to be the best?
I love it. So you grew up in Homer, Alaska, small fishing town, and you eventually moved to Massachusetts where you were a swimmer, rower, and runner in high school. Was there a memory from an early athletic achievement that you still think about today? Maybe an experience, a meet, something that helped shape you and help fuel that competitive fire that we see now?
I think it was the Sydney Olympics. Must have been 2000. I was 8 years old. So I was really young. And I just remember watching the Olympics on TV and being so inspired by these athletes. In that moment, it just became my dream. I was a swimmer at the time. And for me, it was something I could relate to because I watched these swimmers on TV and I saw them as kind of better versions of what I was doing. Wow, like that's what I should aspire to. They're swimmers and I'm a swimmer. So maybe I can be like them one day. Having those role models, even on TV, was incredibly transformative for me. And I remember in middle school, I was overcommitted in running around volleyball and basketball and swimming and dance. And I was on student council and I didn't really have a favorite subject in school yet. I just remember feeling really busy, but I wasn't really fully invested in some of the things I was doing. And I had a basketball coach in middle school, and she said, whatever you do in life, I want you to do with passion.
How good is that?
Her name was Brittany. Before we went out on the court, she said, whatever role I give you for the game today, whatever you're doing in school, whatever you do, do it with passion. It was really impactful for me at that time in my life because I realized that I could do many things pretty well, but I wasn't doing any one thing deeply passionate. So I remember going out on the court that day and I was just passionate on the basketball court. I took my position so seriously and I was so locked in. I did not even notice anyone in the stands. I was just so present. And I was like, wow, this is how it feels like when you really are in the zone and in something. From then on, I really tried to make sure that whatever I did with passion. And if it wasn't something I felt passionate about, I either wouldn't do it or I would find a way to become passionate about it. Even when I started cycling, people are like, how did you get so serious so fast? Whatever you do, just do with passion.
You should give her a part of your gold medal. It sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, I should. I don't think I've told her yet how impactful that was. So I'm going to go back to my hometown for Christmas and I want to make sure I give her a shout out because I'm sure she has no idea or probably doesn't even remember that conversation.
But you know what? That's one of the great things about coaches. Often the most important things they say are things that for them are just a line that they're offering because it's a lesson. Doesn't stick with them.
Mhm.
You know, you express your competitive fire today as a professional athlete, but this time around you said you feel less pressure. Why?
Maybe because I have options. I don't have to be a cyclist. I'm choosing to be a cyclist every single day. I went to school, I got a great education. I feel like if I stop cycling or cycling is no longer enjoyable for me, I have another option for a great career. I can go back and use the skills I've learned to build another life for myself. Every single day, I'm there because I want to be there. I'm not there because someone is forcing me to be there. No one is telling me I have to get certain results. No one is telling me I have to be on this team for the next 4 years. I know that it's my choice. Whenever something is hard or something is unenjoyable or it's freezing cold and raining and I have to train, I just remember this is my choice. I'm here because I want to be here and there's no one forcing me to be here. And I think that relieves the pressure because I'm not doing it for anybody else. I'm doing it for myself. That's why it's so important for me that even if you want to be a professional athlete, that you get an education, that you make sure that you have a potential life outside of sports just in case you get injured or in case something happens and you have to finish your career early. And also to make sure you feel that you are choosing this life every single day.
You know, I've done a lot of work over the years with a lot of professional football players. One of the questions they love to ask college players going into the NFL is, if this doesn't work out, what's your backup plan?
Mm,
Interestingly, in that sport, they prefer your answer to be, I don't have a backup plan.
mm.
They want you to be so all in, like, this is everything. If I don't succeed here. So I love your guidance because it's actually the opposite, but you're offering a real life example of the way we should approach things when we're involved in big moments.
Yeah, I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think there's different things that motivate different people. I mean, there's definitely been times where if this doesn't work out, my life will be severely worse off and therefore I have to keep pushing forward. It adds a level of tenacity to a person who doesn't have other options. In the short term, it works. I worry about that approach for the long term. I don't know how sustainable it is to spend your entire life living in fear, living that if you don't do something, your life is not going to work out. That causes a lot of burnout in people. And I worry about the long term repercussions on people's mental health and how living in that way can be quite damaging, actually.
Yeah, I agree with you that it is not a long term strategy.
Mhm.
Well, I guess in the NFL, you're counting on a 3-year career. You hope for that. But in life, if we had to go to work every day living in fear, that would not be a great way to manage your options.
Mhm.
How did you balance the drive to achieve and the patience required to work through the inevitable ups and downs? I mean, in those early days, yes, you had that blessing that you won that first race in Europe, but there's a lot of ups and downs,
Mm.
literally and figuratively. How do you manage the desire to be very best with the idea that there were going to be a lot of bad days?
The biggest thing is to expect the setbacks. When you don't expect the setbacks, you take the first setback as, oh, I'm just not good enough, or oh, I'm not cut out for this. But when you expect there to be hundreds of setbacks, then you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, that's one.
Check that one off the list.
Off to the next one. Someone once described it as a train. A train's coming, a train's going. It's like, all right, I missed this train, I'll catch the next one. Miss this train, I'll catch the next one. And you kind of have to have this incredible sense of urgency in the moment. So if I don't catch this train, then my career is over. I have to go all in, full gas to catch this train. But if you miss the train, it's like, okay, there will be a next one. I can try again. And so you kind of have to shift gears a bit where, in any given moment, you have to be giving everything to try and finish this race and to try and win. As soon as the race is over, you have to shift gears. You have to be a bit more forgiving of yourself. You have to recognize what you learned and think, okay, I'll have another opportunity. I'll have another opportunity.
Mm.
If you go into every race thinking, oh, I have more opportunities, then you're not going to fight as hard. But if you finish every race and think, oh, this is my race, this is my opportunity, it's never going to come again, then you have a hard time moving on from the past and focusing on the next opportunity.
How did you learn to shift gears like that? Most people struggle with that. You're either all in, all in, all in, and then, oh, well, there's the next train. That's a true gift.
Practice. It's not something we're born with, I don't think. It really comes down to knowing how to be very present. That takes practice. I mean, people do mindfulness activities, people do yoga, meditate, people do a lot of things in life to try and learn how to be present. And ultimately, I think it comes down to how can you train yourself to be present in the moment? In a race, I'm present in the moment. And so I'm only going to tap into the emotions that I need in that moment. I'm not going to be as compassionate and empathetic in a race as I would be in a different situation because I don't want to have to think about whether I'm going to hurt my teammates or offend them in a race. It's like, oh, if I'm worried about them losing the race, then I'm not going to be so focused on winning myself. Whereas outside the race, I want to be a very empathetic and compassionate person. So what do I need here and now? How do I get that here and now and just not think about anything else?
Control what you can control.
Right. I read a lot of books on stoicism. And I think This notion of control what you can control. I had a teammate early on in my career, and I distinctly remember asking her, like, how do you not let this stuff bother you? I don't know if we disagreed with the coach or we were upset about the training plan or the accommodations. She said, I just control what I can control and I don't worry about everything else. That hit me pretty hard. And then a few years later, I learned about stoicism and control what you can control. And I try to apply that in every aspect of my life. It really helps me to control my emotions.
Mm.
In the Olympic road race, I remember going in and thinking, okay, I can't control the weather. I can't control the crowds. I can't control the preparation I did or did not do for the last 12 months. I can only control between now and race day. I cannot control if I'm jet lagged after I travel. I cannot control how my teammates are going to perform. I cannot control how prepared my competition is. Is the course going to suit me or not?
You're declaring these things.
I'm saying them
right
to myself or even out loud in my room to myself. So there's so many things I can't control. Okay, well, what can I control? The crowds in the Olympics is a very stimulating environment. I'm very much of an introvert. I get very overstimulated very easily. There's a lot of crowds. I have a ton of family here to support me. There's a lot of people, a lot of stimulation.
What could you do?
Yeah. So I said, I'm going to spend as much alone time as I can in my hotel room by myself. It sounds really lame, but it was what I needed to perform. I said, I'm going to make sure that I have alone time every single day. I'm going to make sure that I meet my family and friends after my races and not before, because it's going to be too stimulating if I see them before. I will see my mom, my dad, and my boyfriend and everyone else. I will wait to see until after my race. I can't control what food is going to be in the dining hall, but I can control once I'm there, the foods I choose to eat. I can take a look around, speak with a nutritionist, and figure out how to make the best meal plan based on the foods I'm given. I can't control that breakfast opens at 8 a.m. I'm usually awake at 6. But I can control taking snacks from the dining hall to make sure I have something to eat when I wake up, or bringing my own coffee machine to make sure I can make coffee in the morning. I can't control how nervous I'm going to be necessarily on race day, but I can control that I'm only going to think about positive thoughts. I'm going to make sure that I listen to music ahead of time that pumps me up and relaxes me. I'm going to make sure that I don't look at the crowds right before I get on the starting line, because that's going to make me nervous. So instead, I'm going to make sure that I, maybe a brief look at the crowds to take it all in. But then after that, I focus on my bike and me and not on the crowds. In every situation I'm in, I really do a deep assessment of what can I control? What can't I control?
And you verbalize these things.
I verbalize it.
This is a really great lesson for many of us. Control what you can't control is a wonderful phrase, but actually declaring them, how important that is. And I love that you did that.
The other thing is, if you can't control it, do not give it any emotional energy. Like, it is not worth getting stressed about. It is not worth getting emotionally worked up about. It is not even worth thinking about, because there's literally nothing you can do about it. And your emotions are way better spent focused on the things you can control and the things you can take action on. When I write these down, I can't control if it's going to rain. I can't control what time the dining hall opens. I can't control what food there's going to be. Okay, well, that's it. I'm not going to think about it again. There is no emotional energy that is going to be spent worrying or stressing about these things I can't control. Like, it's done, it's on paper, that's over.
I love that. This is the nugget of all nuggets right there. That's awesome. So we've asked this question of almost every guest for 4 years now. There are a lot of folks, especially in the corporate world, who refer to their team. You've been there. Most of our listeners are leaders of some kind. If they're trying to take a team of a bunch of individuals and actually mold them into something that can move ahead and do something special, what would be some things you would advise that leader to do to help make a team really come together?
I think there's a lot of things that I've seen be quite effective. First is that you have to feel a sense of camaraderie and shared values with your teammates, shared interests, shared values. And so figuring out areas where you really connect with them. And as a team, we actually sit down in the beginning of each year and we write down our team values.
Do they change year to year?
They're tweaked year to year, but the fundamentals are very similar. So for example, we never talk bad about our teammates to each other or to the outside. That's a fundamental principle that we feel is important. We value honest communication. It's really important for us that we can trust that if we're going to speak freely. And that might mean we hurt each other's feelings sometimes. It might mean that we have really hard conversations, but we trust that I'm going to be honest with you and you're going to be honest with me. We all love cycling. We all want to win. We all like to have fun. We all value eating healthy or going to bed on time. We all want to make sure that people have the space to be their quirky selves. I love to read, and my teammate likes to make sourdough, and my other teammate likes to dance, and we all have kind of our quirks, and we're going to respect those quirks. Going through and finding either shared interests or shared values that you can connect over really helps bring you together. And it also helps build the respect because you realize that these other people have aspects to their personality that you really respect. And that gets me to my second point, which is it's really important. And I actually do this with every team I join. I go through every single member and I come up with at least one or two things that I deeply respect about that person, something I can learn from them, something I like about them, because it allows me to go into every interaction with them and really focus on that thing. You're never going to like another person's traits 100%. Even your spouse or your partner or your siblings, like there might be something about them that annoys you. But if you can really focus on, like, I really respect this person for this reason, and do that with every one of your team members, it's going to make you feel a lot closer and you're going to appreciate them for those things and what they bring to the table.
And you can go into any conversation with them, whether good or bad, knowing this is something about you that I deeply respect.
Deeply respect, deeply admire. Also, something I can learn from them. Everyone out there in the world has something we can learn from. Maybe someone is a really good chef. Maybe someone is a really good sailor. Maybe someone has grown up in a foreign country and knows about that country that you don't know. I try to ask myself, what's something I can learn from each person? That can be a really good conversation starter with them. And it can allow you to realize that even though you might be really different, they have a lot of value that they bring from the table and they can help make you a greater person just by learning from what they bring. And I guess another aspect is when you go through challenging situations together, I think it always brings people together. For us on a team, going through a race is really hard. Like sometimes actually going through harder situations brings us closer together. So if we're all racing in the rain together and it's really cold, we come back to the team bus and suddenly I have more respect for my teammates because I realize, oh, wow, those were really tough conditions, but
We did it together.
we did it together and no one backed out. No one complained. This person really had a positive attitude and they lifted us all up. I really now have a deeper respect for them because they stayed calm and cool and collected in a really challenging situation. Or this person offered me her gloves and an extra water. Like she really is a teammate who's willing to sacrifice for each other. And I think when you can create those situations through an orientation somehow, or just put people in those situations and kind of force them to grow together, I think it is really effective as well.
Wow. Kristen Faulkner, I have to share. We said you are the full circle moment for us. Most of the people we interview, they have had a history in athletics and then they became leaders. And we talk about how their history impacted their leadership. But interestingly, it was your history in the venture capital world that made you complete full circle. I thank you today for being a corporate competitor with us.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I hope you enjoyed it too.
Okay. Wow. Blown away. First, I want to start with that dinner she had with her brother when she said that she was considering wanting to chase the Olympic dream. He asked her, is it a dream or a goal? And if it's a dream, do what you can. If you can chase it, chase it. You don't want to be 80 years old looking back and regret it. But before she made the decision to actually do so, she researched all that she could. She made pros and cons lists, several of them, it sounds like, prepared for the risks. And then what can you do to mitigate those risks as much as possible? But you're not going to be able to take care of all of them. So you have to be okay with the risks that you cannot fix. Love that. My second one was she didn't want to accept the answer once she got into racing that it was going to take time to get good. All the others on the tour had been racing together for years. So she applied her research skills to research the riders. And she looked at every one of her competitors for strengths and weaknesses. What do they do well? When are they most likely to do something? When might I be able to take advantage of something they don't do well? She treated it like an investment memo, she said, so she could accelerate her learning. She didn't have that 10 years to give to the sport. What do you know about your competitors? What a great question. And then after every race, she was watching films, not just of herself, which is awesome. What did I do? What could I have done better? She also looked at the film of others, looking at the person who won and said, what did they do in that first hour that I didn't do? What could I change to have given myself a competitive advantage? So she didn't just watch film of herself, she watched film of others. Number 3, she built resilience. She just approached everything she was doing with an expectation of hundreds of setbacks so that when one came, she could just argue, hey, I'm going to check the box. This one's not going to overwhelm me. To do that, you have to be present and you have to ask yourself, what do I need to do here and now? Number 4, She talked about belief in controlling what you can control, that entire discussion around stoicism. But she actually verbalizes, here's what I can control, here's what I can't. And as you realize what you can't control, she did so on the eve of the race. I cannot control these things between now and the time of the race. She checks it off and then gives it no more emotional energy. Loved, loved, loved that. And then finally, I did not know for all the years in all the sports I've covered, including racing occasionally, I did not appreciate it as a team sport the way she described it. The fact that the team leader picks and decides today we're racing for this particular person and the rest of the team is going to sacrifice to help that person win. I'll sacrifice for you, you sacrifice for me. That entire mentality, what a skill. Sometimes you're the person that's given to sacrifice. You're not going to receive the recognition, which she remembers from her days in venture capital when she would write something really important or do good research and get no credit for it. So she talked a lot about how that need to recognize those who gave something to make someone else successful is really important. She talked about it on her team, always picking out something she can deeply respect and admire about each person on the team, and then ask herself, what can I learn from them? Kristen Faulker filled my notebook today. I hope the conversation kicks off your 2025 with great experience. I thank you today for beginning your year as a corporate competitor. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. Feedback helps us spread the insights of our guests to a wider audience. It actually increases our ratings. Thank you so much for those who have done so in the past. And catch new episodes every Wednesday. Subscribe at corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to be the first to get a chance to listen. And as a thank you gift, I will send you a chapter from one of my best-selling books. Stay connected with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My handle is @DonYaeger, DonYaeger. And until next week, I appreciate you.